want to keep dancing.
She just wants to keep dancing. Amanda, thank you for being here for the pre-service dance party. We were just discussing prior to this being live or hearing from us, should we let people know that if they aren't here in time, they're going to miss some of the best parts of the service, i.e. dance party time?
Best parts.
Okay, so tell your friends about it.
I don't think it's some of it.
It really is the substance and the heart.
That might be the reason to tune in. Hey, good morning. Welcome to Sojourn Grace Collective. My name is Colby Martin, and this is Kate Christensen Martin, and we are co-pastors here. And for those of you who are somewhat regular, we're back in live. We're back with you here in the moment. We're seeing you in your comments, and we're responding in real time, plus the 20-second delay. Good morning, Kevin. Hi, Laura. Hi, Amanda. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Jazz. It's great to be back, isn't it, babe?
It's so great to be back. I hated pre-recorded. I love live, and I would choose nothing over pre-recorded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would choose just not having
She would
church.
cancel y'all.
I'd rather be
That's what
live.
I heard.
Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, communion. If you didn't see, we are back to doing communion. We didn't know if people really valued that or not, and then the people spoke, and you value it. So back to communion, which I will grab elements at some point. Wow,
We do need
this is
elephants
going.
at some point.
Anyway, anything goes. We have done store-bought powdered donuts and LaCroix. We've done cornbread from a barbecue joint and coffee. Just anything goes. So just grab anything to eat and drink, and we will serve you communion.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, if you want to follow along with the music, you can go to sojourngrace.com/virtual, where you can access a PDF of the lyrics for the songs today. Speaking of songs today, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our lovely musicians behind us. Thanks for being here.
Oh, hi.
Morning. Hi, everybody.
Hey! Can I borrow some food? Can I borrow some food?
You think you know all about it, but it seems you were wrong. You hit it out of the park before it even begun. I needed sunshine in the darkness burning out. Now I know that I'm the fuel and you're the spark. We are bound to each other's hearts, caught, torn, pulled apart. This love is like wildfire. And to my word, now I'll be true, can't stop this breaking loose. This love is like wildfire, like wildfire, wildfire. These feelings arranged deep down inside. Try describing a love that you can't design. Oh, more and more, every inch of me is holding on. Yeah, this is it. All the flames are burning strong, and we are bound to each other's hearts, caught, torn, pulled apart. This love is like wildfire. And to our word, now I'll be true, can't stop this breaking loose. This love is like wildfire, like wildfire. About it, but it seems you were wrong. You hit it out of the park before it even begun. Oh, yeah, yeah, we are bound to each each other's hearts, caught, torn, pulled apart. This love is like wildfire. And to my word, now I'll be true. Can't stop this breaking loose. This love is like wildfire, like wildfire, like wildfire, like wildfire. Well, good morning, everybody. Hope that you're all doing well, and yes, we're fully alive, and Nan and I am
partially.
fully clothed, so you're welcome. There were some complaints that I showed up to church in my underwear when we were not live, so just letting you all know. All right, we have a new song for y'all that we've never done at Sojo before, but we've been singing it for a while, and we just love this tune. There is a shadow in the hallway trying to frighten you. Don't let the darkness surround you. You can make it through. Don't you give up on the kingdom. Think it's crashing in. No, it ain't worth all the worry. They'll still let you in. Well, someday soon these worries roll on. Someday soon enough. Sometimes the weight of decisions try to bury you. Don't let the shame tell you something that you know ain't true. Just 'cause you feel like a stranger, that don't mean you are. But God, I could use a reminder of what forgiveness is for. Someday soon these worries roll on. Someday soon enough. Sometimes the cold wind blows. Sometimes the wolves rush in. Don't think the battle's over just 'cause you say amen. Ooh, amen. Ooh, amen. Someday soon these worries roll on. Someday Someday soon these worries roll on. Someday soon enough. Sometimes the cold wind blows, sometimes the wolves rush in. Don't think the battle's over just 'cause you say amen. Sometimes the cold wind blows, sometimes the wolves rush in. Don't think the battle's over just 'cause you say amen. Amen.
Y'all. Yeah, just question of the day. So you can... Wow. That was, thank you.
Thanks, bye.
So we had several people like Jazz say, I don't know this song, but I need it. That was our reaction as well. So one more time, what's that song and where?
The artist is Wilder Woods, like the word wild with an ER. And it's called Someday Soon. He's actually the lead singer of the band called Need to Breathe, if you know them. So yeah.
Gorgeous. Okay, now is the time in our virtual service where we invite you to interact and respond and engage with one another through what we call the question of the day. And each week we offer you the chance to respond in real time in comments to one another. This is kind of like if we were meeting in person. Remember back in the days when we met in person? And we'd have these times called Pass the Peace, and you would turn and talk to people around you. Well, some of you really missed those moments because you really loved interactions. And many of you are grateful that we don't have those moments because it was so awkward for you. Uh-oh.
There's like a glass shatter.
Oh, yeah, it's the sound effects. So the...
Got it. Great. Keep going.
Karen's reflecting on how amazing that sound effect was, where the... Because the titles go, psh, the words explode, and I have a little too much fun sometimes here. Okay, let's move on. Question of the day. So the question, if you know what we're doing later on in the service, we're doing our continuing our Meaning in Movies series, and we're talking about A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is a wonderful biopic. One of those words, about Fred Rogers. And in the movie, he talks, with puppets and about his puppets, and he asks his friend Lloyd in the movie, did you have a special friend growing up? A stuffed animal, something that you cherished and you loved. So what I'd love to have you respond to today, and it's on the screen, you can see it now. As a child, what or who was your special friend? For me, I had this bear that I called Brownie, and I loved him, and Brownie, I slept with him every night, and Brownie was my special friend. It was a bear. So some of you, it might be a blanket, might be a pillow, whatever it was. So would you share with each other and with us what or who your special friend was, and we'll be back in like
The
Okay, so what we've learned here is that some of you as children were not good at naming, and that's okay.
Hey, I think quilt named quilt is the best.
That's okay.
I love that.
You're just really literal. That's okay. You're creating safety for yourselves. Also, that like Kate and Matthew are quintessential children of the '80s with a snork and a popple, which is beautiful.
I had a Ted called Ted, so I can't throw stones.
You're in that crew. That's great. Children are
A teddy called Ted.
yeah. Named after Theodore. It really breaks my heart to see a dear old friend go down in the worn-out place again. Do you know the sound of a closing door? Have you heard that sound somewhere before? Do you wonder if she knows you anymore? I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. Where did you learn to walk? Where did you learn to run? Away from everything you love. Did you think the bottle would ever ease your pain? Did you think that love's a foolish game? Did you find someone else to take the blame? I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. I am a sturdy soul, and there ain't no shame in lying down in the bed you made. Can you fight the urge to run for another day? You might make it further if you learn to stay. I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye.
Right. I think you all know what we're doing today, the movie that we're kind of watching today together. So this is a song off that movie. I did not grow up with Mr. Fred Rogers at all. So my first encounter with Fred Rogers was on the documentary. I think it was on a plane to Australia. It was in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, and I just turned on the documentary. I had no reference for it whatsoever, and wound up bawling my eyes out, as I'm sure most of you probably do. Then when I saw the movie, it was the same thing, because I just love Matthew Rhys. So this is one of the songs, one of Fred Rogers' songs. It's you. not the things you wear. It's not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like. The way you are right now, the way down deep inside you. Not the things that hide you, not your toys. They're just beside you, but it's you I like. And every part of you, your skin, your eyes, your feelings, whether old or new. I hope that you remember, even when you're feeling blue, it's you I like, it's you yourself, it's you. It's you I like. I hope that you remember, even when you're feeling blue, that it's you I like. It's you yourself, it's you. It's you I like. We like you.
Hello, neighbor.
Hey, I'm looking for Fred Rogers.
In here. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Please won't you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbor.
Mr. Rogers, I'm here to interview you.
It is so nice to meet you.
You okay?
Profiling Mr. Rogers.
Boyd, please don't ruin my childhood.
This piece will be for an issue about heroes. Do you consider yourself a hero?
We are trying to give the world positive ways of dealing with their feelings.
Yeah? Like what?
There are many things you can do. You can play all the lowest keys on a piano at the same time.
You love broken people. Like me.
Sometimes we have to ask for help, and that's okay. I think the best thing we can do is to let people know that each one of them is precious.
Hey, Mr. Rogers. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Please won't you be my neighbor?
That was wonderful.
I'm on. Are you on? You're muted. Tap it. All right. We got that entire trailer to sort out our audio.
And didn't do it. Welcome to Sojourn. We don't have to be perfect.
But we can try?
You can try.
You can try.
We'll talk about the Enneagram later. Hi, everybody. As you said, so happy to be back live. We are doing a series called Meaning in Movies. So, not a new concept. Churches have done this before. Watch movies together and talk about spiritual meaning in them and whatnot. We did go ahead and create 6 very specific questions to analyze for each of the movies. So to go through and talk about spiritual growth, relational growth, personal growth, just kind of our mission, I guess, spiritual, social, and emotional wholeness, how we see that play out in these films. So that's been super fun so far. We've done Frozen 2, Onward, and then Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood this week. And I wanted to share one thing about this series really quick, which is that picking these movies has not been the easiest thing in the world.
As it turns out.
And I mostly take the blame for that. Poor Colby. Poor Colby. I'm very, very picky about what we do here. So I want to say that we want to invite you to pick these movies for us that we do in this series. And I will share with you that I would invite you to be as picky as I am. So one of the things that we've been being really careful about is that we don't want to wreck people's nervous systems right now when we're at such a high stress, high anxiety level in the world, in society already. So anxiety is up here right now. So let's not watch movies that take it to the next level. So war movies come to mind.
Horror movies.
Horror movies come to mind. It's not necessarily that they deal with dark content. All 3 of the movies that we have picked so far have dealt with some dark, heavy, deep things. But they need to not be like nervous system wrecking, like physically bring your heart rate up the whole time. Lots of sensory, dark issues, super trauma triggering where it like shows the deep, dark trauma. Let's just not go too dark with it. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Am I saying that okay enough?
I like that.
Those parameters. Let's not go too deep. We want to restate something.
I was saying the Enneagram 4 is telling us not to go dark.
Oh, yeah, Matthew's laughing about how the Enneagram 4 is saying don't go dark. So that tells you something.
Yeah.
I think
We're conscious of the self-care part of
Yeah.
it, and we want to help shepherd wellness in that.
Yeah.
And so I think your instincts on that were spot on, and we had a great conversation yesterday to kind of crystallize those instincts. And
Yeah, and I think
helpful.
Matthew pointing that out is perfect because it's actually that my Enneagram 4-ness is bringing this to light, because what happens for me is that I go into the darkness, set up camp there, and then live there, and have spent many years of my life unwell because of that, which is all of our Enneagram journeys, right? That's just my specific one. We all do that in something. Mine is the darkness. And I've learned to manage that and to, to self-care myself out of that. And so now I'm on high alert all the time of like, let's not dive down and build camp there. And so when everybody's anxious already, it's just, let's not be too anxious. So anyway, please, though, I'm being super serious about all these parameters, but please throw out your ideas of movies that you've loved, movies that you might be excited about.
Did you say already that doesn't have to be a recent movie?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be recent at all. Go back into your childhood if you want. I don't know, just throw out some of your favorite movies or ideas.
In fact,
ones that would be
I'll
fun
tell you
to
what we're doing
discuss.
next week, but we'll do that in the benediction, and we're going back like 40 years
Oh, yeah.
for next week's movie.
Cool.
Right?
40?
Isn't it? I don't know. Maybe not. I just feel like we're getting.
Question that
I just feel like we're getting old, and so I have to keep upping whatever the amount of time I look back into. Okay, that was awesome. So should we get into today's movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which I see in the comments here that some of you haven't watched it yet, and I please hear us say that is fine. Like, you don't have to. And here's what I would say: in order to enjoy and or appreciate and or even get something out of these Sunday morning meaning in movies messages, one does not need to have seen the movie in question, because we're not necessarily dissecting the movie as the movie as much as we are letting the movie illuminate themes and ideas that then we sort of extract and talk about here. So having seen the movie or not is totally fine, and that's it. So should we go to question 1?
Yes.
Here we go. Kate, would you share with us, where did you see Christ and or Jesus? We've been talking about each week that we might take one or two of those identities in response to this question.
Yeah. So, in this film, it was funny because I kind of felt like just answering this question with Mr. Rogers. That's my answer to that question.
I saw him in Fred.
Right. But to go a little deeper into that, I loved when Fred Rogers' producer, I forget his name. Do you remember his name off the top of your head?
No.
Anyway, the character of his producer tells the other main character, Lloyd, that Fred likes everybody, but he loves people like you. And this kind of messes with Lloyd's head a little bit. And then later in the movie, Lloyd brings that back up, and he names to Fred, "Oh, people like me. I get that now. I get what your producer meant. He meant broken people." And just without skipping a beat, Fred Rogers is like, "I don't think you're broken." And then he flips it and talks about the beauty. And I think there's not a person in the world who doesn't see that Fred Rogers is exactly what the producer was saying. We all see that, right? It's true. He's attracted to these people that society would label broken, and he moves toward them. When society is moving away from broken people, Fred is moving toward them. And that to me is just the epitome of Jesus or Christ, whatever, like however you want to break that down. And then goes even further with it and is like, it's not just that I believe in hanging out with broken people, it's that I believe in flipping the script entirely, and it's not even brokenness to me, it's beauty. And just that whole idea of, people will say like, Jesus dined with the sinners or whatever, and it's like, no, actually he just didn't see them as sinners, is that idea to me. It's beautiful.
I love that so much. Yeah, I can imagine one of the people that first century Jewish communities would have called a sinner saying that to Jesus, like, "Oh, you're drawn towards people like me." People like who? Well, sinners. And Jesus having that, like,
What?
wait, what?
Yeah.
That's how you see yourself? That's the label you give to yourself? So good. All right, so for me, what came up for me as I was watching this is there's this moment where Lloyd, who, if you haven't seen the film, is this journalist who's been assigned, it's based on inspired by a true story. Lloyd is a journalist for, is it Esquire magazine, who's given an assignment to go just do like a short little 400-word piece on Fred Rogers, and yet it ends up being a much longer experience that he has with Fred. And so Lloyd is waiting to talk to Fred, and he meets Fred's wife, and which I'm sorry, I shouldn't call her Fred's wife, but I've drawn a blank on her name. So Fred's wife. And Lloyd says...
I don't remember it either.
Okay, cool. So Lloyd says to her something about like he calls Mr. Rogers a saint. He's such a saint as he's out there just sort of interacting with people and loving people and just has this saintly spirit to him. And Fred's wife says this: if you think of him as a saint, then his way becomes unattainable. If you think of him as a saint, then his way becomes unattainable. And she explains that the way that he is, he works on that. He practices that. And if you know anything about Fred Rogers, that in there, the thing that Lloyd is identifying as a saint is this kindness, this openness, this compassion, this just loving, tender spirit for people. And I love that why this made me think of Jesus is because I think that for a lot of church history, Christianity has become about worshiping Jesus, not so much following. It's become about worshiping Jesus, not becoming disciples. And what Jesus seemed to, at least the record we have of the Gospels, what he seemed to be interested in was people following in his way, like living as he did, practicing his practices. And yet the church then took it, rather than let's live like Jesus, to then let's just hold him up on a pedestal and let's worship him. And that became the thing. But when you worship somebody, like Soren Kierkegaard says, when you worship someone, you can keep them at a distance. It's safe. There's no actual impact on your life. But when you follow someone, suddenly there's a real demand. So I love this idea that calling someone a saint now goes into your mind as, well, they're different. They're holy. They're separate. So whatever they're like, I can't be like that. And so I just love the way that for me illuminated this relationship that Jesus invites followers in to have with him, which is, no, my way, this way of radical love and compassion and kindness and forgiveness, is not unattainable. It's not just reserved for some holy people or people that have it all figured out. It can be a way that you practice. And so that really jumped out to me in that.
Love it.
Question 2?
Question 2.
And I don't know if people can hear me talk while I'm saying this. So would you let me know if you can hear me say, what Enneagram types do you think the main characters are? Enneagram.
Enneagram. Hey, really quick, before we say what we saw as types in the movie, I want to speak to the Enneagram itself really quick. The Enneagram is another tool that we use for spiritual growth, personal growth in our lives. And it is just that. It's not the gospel truth that applies to all things. It's just one little way that we can practice growth, right? The thing about the Enneagram is that typing people is actually antithetical to the Enneagram. You don't type people. You don't look, because the Enneagram isn't about anything outward. It's actually not about our behavior. It's not about our outward expressions. It's actually the personality tool test program. I'm lacking words for that thing.
Tool test program.
Tool test program.
What other better words are there?
It's actually the only one of those types of things that for me actually goes inward enough to be a good resource. So that's why I'm obsessed with the Enneagram. So when we do things like say, what do you think the Enneagram types were in a movie? Well, we have no idea because we don't know the internal motivations and the internal drive behind a character in a movie. I don't say that to mean that it's irrelevant. I mean, we put it in here and it was my idea. So I love it, it's fun, but I just like to remind us that all we're looking at when we look at a film is actions and behaviors, and so we can jump to stereotypes in that.
Yeah.
Those things can be clues, and there's connections there, right? Yes, Enneagram 1s all act a little bit like each other. They're vastly different because it's really about your internal motivations. So it's fun to look at the Enneagram and think about what might be driving someone, but we never actually know at all. There are folks who, like myself, who act very one type. Their outward expression is very this type, and then their inward motivation for those actions is totally different. So that's just a little bit about the Enneagram. It's all about what's inside. What's driving you? What's motivating you? So what did you think?
Yeah, so we're typing these folks just for the fun of the exercise.
Yeah. And it helps you think about it. Like it is a good thing to think about of what's driving that person.
That's
what's
cool.
making them act in these ways.
That's
what
cool.
might be behind. What might be their why. We don't know their why, but it's fun to ask.
Yeah, for me, the character of Lloyd, the journalist for Esquire, I saw him as someone who was really running from pain, trying to keep himself constantly busy and distracted, and had this huge pain point in his life that he did not want to deal with. Had this real aggressive posture towards others, so had this confrontational, he had a reputation for getting into a story and finding a way to just really make someone maybe not come out in the best light. Just kind of had this aggressive confrontational nature to him. And he seemed to thrive in conflict. So that was where so when I think of those three attributes, for me, type 8 is what comes to mind. So I typed Lloyd as a type 8. What about you?
I did not.
Okay.
I see what you're speaking to, those outward actions and behaviors. I saw them through a different type's lens. So for me, I saw him acting like an 8, maybe, like those outward actions are very 8-like, which, just real quick about 8s, I like to flip. So in typical Enneagram language, we say the needs have a need, or the 8s have a need to be against, and I like to say that 8s have the need to protect, because that's what that's coming from. It gets at their drive better instead of just their behavior. The behavior might be against, but the drive is a need to protect. So I saw that for sure, this wall nature of him. I saw it very much through a 3 lens. He felt so Enneagram 3 to me. The 3s do the same thing as the 8s, this protective wall thing, but it's from a different place. And for me, that was what was going on with Lloyd, is it was an emotional place. There was, for me, as he moved through the world, he was taking everything in through emotion, which is the 3s. They're in the heart center. But in each of those triads, the heart center, the head center, and the body center, the types that are in the middle of each of those, which are the 3s in their heart center, they're in the center of the heart center, they have this interesting phenomenon happen where they take it in through that center and then get blocked and stuck there. So our sweet threes are feeling the world and then spinning out in that's too much feeling, and they wall up because they don't know how to express and experience all of that feeling. And that was how I experienced his confrontational, againstness, wall upness. It felt very emotional to me and very heart-centered. And even things like his turning to work, that felt like what that was for me, of a three's need to, in the midst of trauma. There was even a scene where he's just like, I gotta go to work, right? Really fast. And
Can't relate to that.
our threes get typed as workaholics, and that's very much Lloyd, right? He's super stereotyped as a workaholic, but in our threes you see that it's this, I don't even like to call it a coping mechanism, but it's how they experience life in the world is through their work, and it is how they cope. It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was what I saw in Sweet Lloyd.
What about you, watchers? Have you seen this? What would you type
Did you
Lloyd
do some
as?
typing?
And then the other character that I typed is Fred. And for me, when I watch the character of Fred play out on screen, I see somebody who is deeply relational, so really thrives on that intimate connection with other people, is very much anchored, centered, connected to his feelings. So I'm already like put him in that feelings triad space. And then he just strikes me as someone who's very energized by helping others. That he doesn't do it out of obligation. He doesn't do it because he thinks he has to. He does it because it really does bring him life. And so for me, when I put those characteristics together, I think type 2. So I typed Fred as a 2.
I'm not sure how this is disputable, but yeah.
He
I don't know
might
how
be
to
the
type
most
him as
quintessential 2.
Me too. But I would say a very, oh, go ahead.
I think if he's two.
A 9?
Yeah.
We have votes for 9 in the room.
Two,
I thought
or
through that.
It's either 2 with a 1 wing or 1 with a 2 wing. I can get behind 2 because he's definitely a reformer and he definitely had a very strong sense of what was right and what should be.
I so agree. I was going to say that in my 2-ness. So for me, there's no way he could be 9, but I feel like 2 is
Shut
1
down.
in there. But I see what you're saying in the 9-ness. The 9 and 2s are similar in some stuff. There were other things that didn't fit for me.
He's repressed anger, though. He's repressed anger.
Oh,
That's
all right.
2s. That's 2s. And 1s, yeah.
What'd you think? I
Anyway,
see,
yeah.
Laura, you typed Mr. Rogers as a 2 as well. I support that. So if you have other votes out there, let us know. All right.
Yeah, and that 2-1 mix is, they call it the activist, which to me is Fred Rogers. So.
Right on. Question number 3. How did you see yourself? How did you see your story in this movie? I'll knock this one out really quick. All right. Here's how I saw myself in this story. In Lloyd. Okay, moving on. That's it. It's just
Wait, so are you saying I'm right about the Enneagram
no,
type then?
I could now sort of go back. I
Right?
can go back and be like, oh, I guess that makes sense. But here's why I felt so seen and so read by Lloyd, was that Lloyd was just intensely and entirely detached from his feelings. And you described how that sort of tragically works for type 3s, to be completely driven by and experience the world through the feelings, but then to be simultaneously be detached from them, unable to identify them, unable to name them, and then having to like process them. I mean, that's not even close to that. When you can't identify your name, there's no way you can process. So for most of my life, I was entirely unable to identify my feelings. Didn't know what they were, so I couldn't name them. And then, never was able to process them. So it wasn't even until, 5 years ago through therapy that I started to develop language and tools and awareness around what my feelings were. Because I think for the most part, and you can graciously affirm this, I think for the most part in my adult life, I just thought I didn't have a lot of feelings. Or maybe felt I wasn't a very emotional person, but really it's just that they were suppressed and or repressed and or just foreign to me. So Lloyd has this whole journey in the movie of coming to this reckoning with his feelings and emotions, because he had the Jedi Master of Emotions, Fred Rogers, working with him and helping him to see those and name those and love that part of him. So I very much connected to the Lloyd character as someone who has a long history, ongoing struggle to access and name and deal with my emotions.
And sorry that I'm the biggest Enneagram geek ever, but those moments, they happen a few times in the movie, those moments when Lloyd names out loud, "I'm fine," while everyone around him sees that he's clearly not, is a very classic 3.
Never happens.
Like, "You're crazy" is the "I'm fine." Like, why would you think there's something wrong with me? Meanwhile, it's so obvious that there's something wrong, so that feels very, very true.
Okay, what about
Are we
you?
on? Oh.
Yeah, how did you
I was
see
like, next question.
yourself and or story?
Well, I feel like a broken record. I realized as I was processing this movie that this is the 3rd movie in a row that we have done with that
It is, isn't
dealt
it?
with and centered around a dead parent. I was like, what are we doing?
Wow.
So sorry. I
Speaking of
guess.
self-care.
Yeah, true. Anyway, so that it was a very difficult movie for me to watch.
Yeah.
And I watched it 3 times accidentally. I didn't mean to watch it 3 times. Is this where I wanted to share? No, I'll share that later. Okay, so I'll just say, yeah, that story, watching that story play out. Oh, I know what I wanted to share about this. So I used to refer to this as my glasses of death. And Lloyd has this. When you watch the physical experience of watching someone die at a young age, it leaves this imprint on you. And especially when that person is the person who physically gave birth to you, there is a very, I keep saying the word physical over and over again, but there's a physical thing that happens, and you carry it around with you in a very bodily way. And I could just see it in Lloyd's body, in everything that he experienced. And people tend to, in our world, label that as pessimism, or being against, or being combative or negative. But I saw it in Lloyd as a glasses of death thing. He's not seeing everything in a negative light, he's seeing everything as dying. And that can, in transformation and growth, which we'll get to, become a gift. And I think it does for Lloyd. And I also think that he lives out the curse and gift, the both-andness of that in different times. It's a beautiful way to see the world, but you can see it physically sitting on him. I don't know if that made sense. Anyway, that's what I related to, resonated with.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's a little bit ironic that we've done now 3 weeks where a lot of the plot hinges on.
It's funny.
So thanks for sharing your experience with us 3 weeks in a row.
Sorry.
Okay, don't be sorry. Question 4, here we go. What truths about transformation did you notice in this movie? How did this movie speak to transformation and growth to you, Pastor Kate?
Yeah, one of the things that I noted was what you shared about, I think it was in the Jesus question, about if he's a saint, then it's not attainable. And I wrote word for word what you already shared, so I won't repeat that part of my transformation and growth. But going back to that, just that we tend to do this thing where there's some people who are saintly, and we can't attain that. And especially, I see that as being such an unhealthy thing in spirituality, in spiritual communities. This just, we come together to worship this one guy who did it, or this one way who did it, or this one person who did it, instead of, we could all do this together, practice this. That stood out to me. But the bigger thing I wanted to share about transformation and growth in this movie, I'm kind of going a different way with it in my experience of watching the film, but it's also in the film. This doesn't make sense. I'm blabbing. I'm just going to tell the story. So when I first saw this film, I saw it in the theater. My sister-in-law was here visiting from Oregon, and it was her birthday trip, and it was to celebrate her and to give her a good time. So I thought one thing we could do is go to a movie without kids. We both have little ones. So I took her to a movie, and this is what was playing. So we took her to see Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Had no idea what this film was about at all, and certainly didn't know about these themes that go a little deeper into Lloyd's life, like losing his mom at a very young age. And so we're sitting there just being surprised over and over again by the content of the film, had no clue. We get to the scene where Lloyd is flashing back to his mother's sickness. She's in like this hospital bed thing that's kind of a dream sequence, so it's very creatively done, and I loved how it was done, and obviously very triggering for me, right? And so I start to get that bodily experience that we all get when we're being triggered. You know, maybe your heart races, maybe your stomach starts to feel a little sick, maybe you feel shaky and clammy. I start to do that, like, I need to run away from this feeling. And my sister-in-law, without like looking over at me, and obviously not knowing inside what's happening for me, well, but kind of, she just sees what's happening on the screen, and she just swoops over to me, grabs my whole body, holds me, starts rocking me, and whispers in my ear, "We can leave, let's go. Do you want to go?" And it wasn't like, let's get out of here, let's avoid this pain together. It was like, I'm here, what do you need? And I said, it's okay, let's stay. And she just held me through the whole thing. And so what I want to say about transformation and growth that I saw in this film was that exact thing, is that we grow and transform when we can sit through our triggers with a person who's compassionate enough to know our triggers without us saying anything, to know our story enough to know what triggers us, and then to be willing to either sit in it and rock you or leave. Either one. I'm good, let's go. What do you need through this trigger? Let's do what you need. That relational part of transformation and growth, I think, is key. And it actually plays out in the film too in the opposite way, where I see that lacking for Lloyd, which I will speak to more with one of the other questions. But so it's not really about the movie, but it's kind of about me viewing the movie, and that's what I see it as transformation and growth. How about you?
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, so good. So, I mean, this movie just, for me, deals with all sorts of aspects of growth and transformation. And so two things that came up for me. One is the idea of forgiveness. Early on in the film, Mr. Rogers says about forgiveness, he says, "Forgiveness is a decision that we make to release another person from the feelings of anger that we have toward them." And I think that's a really good description of forgiveness. And I was reminded as well of another teaching where it's important that we remember that forgiveness is a process, it's not an event. So this practice, you might say this practice of forgiveness to release another person from the feelings of anger that we have toward them, for me, like, that is just a massively important part of the work of transformation in our lives, is the work of figuring out and practicing and learning to forgive others, to release them of the feelings of anger that we have. To go back to that scene with Lloyd and his mom in the hospital bed, one of the things his mom said to them was, she said, "I know you're holding on to this anger." Because Lloyd had all this anger about the way that how his mom died and how his dad left in the midst of all that and all this anger. And his mom said, "I know you're holding on to this anger, but I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need you to be angry about this anymore." So all these moments for Lloyd to be able to access this deep, the deep power of forgiveness, that was super impactful for me. And then the other one was the theme of acceptance. Mr. Rogers at one point says, "I don't think anyone can grow unless they're accepted just as they are."
Reach.
I don't think anyone can grow unless they're accepted just as they are. And this is really, I would say, not how most of us, or not how society functions. We kind of function as the way to get people to change and to grow is through force or shame or fear. We just try to make them change and make them be someone different. But this is not the path for growth. I mean, if you could look back on your own life, I know I can do this for myself. If I can look back on my own life and sort of isolate or identify the times when I have experienced the most personal transformation and growth, I can reverse engineer that and be like, oh, that's because in that context, there was complete love and acceptance just for who I was in that moment. Not this sort of, you will find wellness and acceptance once you change. It was, no, just as you are. And I love how, if you've been around Sojourn for any length of time, this is mostly back when we met, in real IRL, Kate would talk about often how one of our main values at Sojourn as it relates to our kids is that kids are human just as they are. Like they get to be a full human just at the size that they are, that we don't wait to treat them as humans until they become later. We give them full acceptance and love just as they are. And I think, how might that change the world if we did that same sort of posture toward one another? Full acceptance just as you are, not expecting you to be someone entirely different.
Which I grew up on Mr. Rogers, so that's where I get that from.
Yeah,
Treat kids
okay,
as humans
we didn't talk about
exactly
that.
as they
Did you grow up watching Mr. Rogers?
Yeah,
That's cool.
he is my Yoda.
I have a hard time remembering that period of my life in general. So the thing that was coming up for me when we were watching it this second time was, I think I remembered, and I could just be creating this story because it feels good, but I think I remember liking Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show, but feeling silly watching it. And so I think, if I remember correctly, I often wouldn't watch it probably as much as I would have liked to, because I think I was living into some sort of societal narrative where that show wasn't cool. And most of my life has been about trying to be what is cool. So I have this sort of deep love and affection for the show, and yet I don't remember watching it all that much. So that's interesting to me. Okay. Whew. Question number 5. What unhealthy narratives were exposed or perpetuated in this film? You want to go first?
No, I think you should, because
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah.
actually know your answer to this.
Yeah.
And we realized that our answers to this question are very yin-yang. So they're going to seem like a complete contradiction of one another, and I don't think they are. And I think that's the coolest, because I love paradox so much.
Yes. This is like dual permission for whatever path you might take is co-pastor approved. Okay. So,
What?
here, was that weird?
Yes, you made it weird.
Okay. Here's what came up for me in terms of unhealthy narrative. So, if you've seen the movie, or if you have heard enough about it, you have the character Lloyd, who has this deep relational separation from his father, and it goes back to these events that happened when they were younger, with his mom dying and dad just leaving and all that. So, most of Lloyd's life there was this huge chasm between the two of them. And then at the beginning of the film, Lloyd's dad kind of comes back into the picture through a wedding, and they end up getting into a fight, and there's punches thrown. It's like, so here's what came up for me. That one of the narratives that I think we live into, or that I think are given to us, is that some relationships that are broken will just always be broken. It's just that they are damaged, too much pain has been caused, and they will always be that way. And that this is the narrative that is given to us, that this dynamic that you have with that person will always result, or will always end up in fistfights if you go to the same wedding together. Like that is now your lot in life for that relationship with that person. And so part of what I loved in this movie is that as you watch the story envelop, and as Lloyd gets more in touch with his emotional sense, and as his father has grown into this later stage in life where he's ready to try to make amends for some of that and show up, then you have, at the end of the film, spoiler alert, you have this beautiful reconciliation where there does seem to be some real forgiveness, which Fred Rogers said, with family is often the hardest. With the people that we love, are oftentimes the hardest ones to forgive. And so for me, it was taking this narrative of, nope, sometimes relationships are so broken, like that's it. You'll never find repair with that. You'll never find reconciliation. And it showed how even amidst these two characters that you would think really would never find repair and forgiveness, they found it at the end of the film. And I thought that was really beautiful. So that was what came up for me. And then you go.
And I felt that it was extremely unhealthy and perpetuating an unhealthy narrative to expect Lloyd to have duty to be a polite, good, show up for family human, with absolute disregard to his extreme trauma and the harm done to him by his father. all the way to being where the character of Andrea, who's Lloyd's wife, was extremely problematic for me. I couldn't stand the way that character was written because she just constantly expected him to dutifully show up. She even surprise attacks him with the father figure in their home without him knowing. He walks in, this character who's been nothing but harmful to him, hasn't done anything to make amends, isn't even showing up with a posture of trying to make amends, really, still just being antagonistic and harmful and triggering of trauma. And there's no honoring of his trauma. There's no creating space for, of course, this person in your life is not someone that you can just show up to and just relax around and be in relationship with. And that for me is such an unhealthy narrative that we have in our culture of you show up with this duty to family no matter what, and you show up and you be polite and you be hospitable no matter the harm that's been done to you. And for me, I'm like, no, you are not only allowed to, you are invited to draw boundaries, to honor your trauma, to distance yourself. My favorite definition of forgiveness is aphemi, which is the Greek definition, which simply means to separate from. So I practice forgiveness in my life by separating my identity from the harm that's been done to me. So if someone has caused me great harm, I forgive them by not identifying with that harm. That is not who I am. It's not my story, and I refuse to walk in it. Now, sometimes that can look like reconciliation, but they are not synonymous. You do not have to reconcile with those who have caused you harm, and it's beautiful. Like Cole spoke to, this is why it's paradoxical, because I still agree with everything that you said, and it's beautiful that they found reconciliation in the end, but I hated some of the story that led to it. I wish that Lloyd's trauma had been honored and his boundaries would have been honored.
Yeah.
Instead, he was asked to repent of that scene where he's at the hospital, his dad, and he needs to get out of there. I wanted him, this is what I was going to say about my story with my sister-in-law. In the film, it doesn't play out that way. He doesn't get a my sister-in-law character.
Yeah.
Andrea says to him, you need to show up. This is where you should be right now. You should be facing this in the hospital. And he's going, I hate hospitals. I hate hospitals. And anybody who understands trauma, even a tiny bit, knows that he was having a major trauma response, and he needed out of there. And he didn't have my sister-in-law to go, do you need to leave? Do you want to go? We can go. And he needed that. And it pissed me off that he didn't get it. So, anyway, both and.
I think that's cool, by the way. Why do I think that's cool? I think it's cool because if you're watching this right now, or if you're listening back to the podcast or watching the stream later, and you've seen this movie or you've just heard us talk about this theme right here, or if you're just a human, because this is a pretty common experience, you might have a person that comes to mind, and even maybe a family member or a close friend or somebody for whom there has been fracture in the relationship. And I think if you're anything like me, you can oftentimes get lost in this place of how do I handle that? What is the best or the right response? Do I try and seek reconciliation? Do I try and find repair? Or do I create some healthy boundaries and understand that person is no longer in my life, or that season is no longer a part of, like, which one is it? And I think what we're saying is yes.
Only you can know that.
Only, and I can imagine that we move through these different routes or paths in different stages of our life. You might spend a decade of your life firmly at peace in the place of, nope, the best move for me right now is to have this full separation, this full boundary set where that person just isn't in my life anymore. And that is a good move for you for 10 years. And then maybe one day you wake up at year 11 and you're like, now maybe I might want to try this other path. You see what I'm saying? How, like, you might just have full seasons of your life where you're in, and I think our hope is that no matter which path you take, if you are finding, maybe I'll say this, if you're finding peace and wholeness within that path, then reject any of the voices that might try to creep in and be like, but you should be trying to repair. You should be trying to find reconciliation. You should be, that's what good Christians do, or that's what the right path is. Like, you can just reject those sort of shoulds, because I think, at least as far as we are saying today, both of those are beautiful, wonderful, appropriate, good paths to take, even if at times they feel at odds.
Last, right? Last.
Yes, this
question.
is the final question. Gotta find the button. Question 6. How did this movie illuminate the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? And how did The Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood illuminate it?
Mm-hmm.
You want me to go?
Sure.
Okay, for me, what I took away from this movie is that life is to be savored. Life is to be savored. And I think that, that Fred Rogers is somebody who found this truth about life, that life is to be enjoyed and savored specifically in the present moment. I remember when the movie first came out, I was reading an interview with Tom Hanks, who plays Fred. And one of the things Tom said that made it so difficult to play this role was how slow Tom had to be with all of his lines, with all of his mannerisms.
Mm-hmm. I'm dying with you during that right
He
now.
had to slow everything down to match the normal pace of Fred Rogers. All right, I'll pick it back up into Colby pace. But I just found that so fascinating that in order that for Fred, and this goes back to if you see him as a saint, then it's unattainable. Maybe Fred was just naturally sort of slow in nature, or maybe that was the result of his years of practicing this mindfulness, this present attention to the moment. There was a moment where he was first talking on the phone to Lloyd, and Fred said, "Do you want to know what the most important thing in the world to me is right now?" And Lloyd said, "What is it?" And Fred said, "Talking to Mr. Lloyd on the phone." Like that really was the present moment was the most important moment to Fred. I love that scene when they're filming Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the whole crew is trying to get the episode started, and Fred's having this moment of interaction with this little boy who has this oxygen tube and he's got this sword, and everybody just has this intense posture of impatience with this kid who's holding up Mr. Rogers, and Fred's just, the most important thing to him in that moment was this little boy and his sword and making sure that he's, so for me, this is like, what is the meaning of life? Well, maybe it's just to be in the moment, not anxious about the future, not full of regret about the past, but just present in the moment, savoring the gift of each moment.
I love it.
What about you?
For me, at the very end of the movie, Mr. Rogers is speaking to Lloyd's family while Lloyd's dad is on his deathbed, so to speak. And he says, "To die is to be human, and anything human is mentionable, and anything mentionable is manageable." He says it way slower than that, because he's Fred. And then he repeats himself, "Anything human is mentionable, and anything mentionable is manageable." And for me, that just summed up life. It's to be human and to talk about it. To be human and to be human together. And it also speaks to the journey of Lloyd, that he was walking around carrying the weight of death in a culture that's death avoidant. So no one wants to mention it, no one wants to talk about it. He needs to. And so Fred wraps that all up at the end of, it's human, let's talk about it. That's everything to me. It's human, let's talk about it.
What about you? What did you hear, see, feel as it relates to the meaning of life in watching A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? And if you haven't seen the movie, then maybe today's time together inspired you to maybe you want to check it out. I do think it is a great movie and that you would enjoy it.
Sweet. Let's serve communion.
Let's
So if you need a second to
transition.
go grab the elements, we have half of an everything bagel thin,
So that's a something bagel.
and you're gonna be okay. It's almost done. And a strawberry mango sparkling water. It's great. It's great. It's great. Hey, these are your reminder that you are accepted exactly as you are in this moment. Just every little tiny piece of you, who you are. Your story, your past, your history, everything that's happened to you, every bit of harm that has been done to you that is not who you are, and you are accepted exactly as you are in those wounded moments and in your moments of healing and everything in between. Every bit of you and every bit of your story is loved and accepted and celebrated. I almost hate the word accepted because it's not just that we don't tolerate you. We celebrate you and your journey and every bit of what it means to be you. And so know that and take your bite of whatever you have and let that message, let this be a moment of embodiment. Embody that message. You are literally going to put this in your body and let it be the message. Just feel it in your bones that you are celebrated and whole and everything about you is loved.
Thank you. Let's take together.
I'm chewing into the microphone. I don't like that at all.
Can you hear the poppy seeds?
I'm sorry, everybody who's like me and disgusted and enraged by the sound of chewing.
And now as we take the cup, whatever it is you have this morning to represent the cup, I'd actually like to read a short poem, which if you know me might be a little bit of a surprise that I chose
I'm not
a
going to believe you
poem.
anymore that I don't like poetry.
But I actually came across this morning. My friend Rob Ryersey shared this on Facebook, so thanks at Rob. And I thought this is not only a great poem to read in communion, like Kate said, to just remind us of the sacredness of who you are, of who you are. But I think it also is this beautiful embodiment of the patience and the presence that Fred Rogers embodied. And I think that we can really learn from. So this is called The Patience of Ordinary Things by Pat Schneider. And it goes like this. It is a kind of love, is it not? How the cup holds the tea, how the chair stands sturdy and foursquare, how the floor receives the bottom of shoes or toes, how soles of feet know where they're supposed to be. I've been thinking about the patience of ordinary things, how clothes wait respectfully in closets, and soap dries quietly in the dish, and towels drink the wet from the skin of the back, and the lovely repetition of stairs. And what is more generous than a window?
Beautiful.
Take whatever you have as the cup this morning, and as you do, remember that you are not separate from the holy, from the beautiful, from the good. Thanks for joining us this morning for our message on a beautiful day in the neighborhood. We'll be right back with our benediction after the band shares this next song with us.
I like Mr. Rogers so much. I will have to die for this, I fear. There's rage and terror and there's sickness here. I fight because I have to. I fight for us to know the truth. There's not enough rope to tie me down. There's not enough tape to shut this mouth. The stones you throw can make me bleed, but I won't stop until we're free. Wild hearts can't be broken. No, wild hearts can't be broken. This is my rally cry. I know it's hard, we have to try. tie me down. There's not enough tape to shut this mouth. The stones you throw can make me bleed, but I won't stop until we're free. Wild hearts can't be broken. No, wild hearts can't be broken. You beat me, betray me, you're losing, we're winning. My spirit above me, you cannot deny me. My freedom is burning, this broken world keeps turning. I'll never surrender, there's nothing but a victory. There's not enough rope to tie me down. There's not enough tape to shut this mouth. The stones you throw can make me bleed, but I won't stop until we're free. Wild hearts can't be broken. No, wild hearts can't be broken. This wild heart can't be broken.
Thank you for being with us this morning or into the afternoon or evening, depending on which part of the world you're watching from. Really good to be back with you live. It'll be really, really, really good to be back with you live. We have to now have a new word for that sort of live. Abundant. That's what abundant life is. Oh, it's eternal life. Oh. How did
We made it so true.
Okay, this week, would you watch, if you haven't seen it yet, or rewatch the movie that we're going to talk about next Sunday, which is, drum roll, The Princess Bride. That's right. That's right. We saw how many people listed that as one of your favorite movies, and we're like, let's just talk it. Let's just explore it. I'm sure that talks about the meaning of life in all sorts of beautiful and profound ways.
In problematic ways.
That's true. It might have some unhealthy narratives, but hopefully it will be somewhat uplifting for you in this coming week. And then on Sunday we'll watch it.
And I will miss you. I will not be here next week.
Yeah, and we'll miss Kate.
Colby will talk about Princess Bride.
Yes. So that'll be fun. And then we've seen some of your suggestions come through. Thank you. We will take those into account.
Cool.
If you want to send us email or leave a comment on this video, what your recommendation is, that would be fantastic.
Facebook message.
And then finally, I've got one house note.
House notes.
And that is that Pastor Kate put together a survey to help assess where our community is at in regards to what are your needs? Why am I explaining? Why don't I just hand it over to you? What's the survey? I don't want a survey explain.
Yeah, it's in the sanctuary. I will repost it again, and I'll put it on the public page too, in case you're not part of the sanctuary and don't want to be.
Good call.
And just blast it all over the place. Maybe Matthew will send it out in a newsletter. Just been so helpful already with the 38 of you who filled it out. Almost all y'all want us to do more meditations midweek, which is awesome. So good to hear. Things like that are exactly why we did the survey, to find out what are the things that we've tried and we're like, I don't know, did people actually want this? Now we know you do want that, now we'll do it. So, and doing communion again today, that's why, because you said you want that. So, so helpful for us. So thank you. It's helping us figure out how to navigate this tricky time.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
All right. This is our benediction. We say it every Sunday at the conclusion of our gathering, and you see it on the screen. So would you follow along at home as you are willing or able? Or in your own head if you feel awkward about it. It's fine. You do you.
Be brave.
Because you are a child of God.
And be kind.
Because so is everyone else. Love ya. Have a good week.